So when I went to Peckham, it was a complete eye-opener. I mean, this was proper hard-nosed South East London with a considerable Afro-Caribbean population. Second generation, they were growing up. The Windrush parents had come over in the late 50s, the early 60s. They'd had their kids and now they're growing up. So they're teenagers and young men in Peckham. And they are subject of racism, police violence, being fitted up and beaten up by the cops, and they're angry.
Is this around the time of the Toxteth riots? Because I remember that kicked off in near where I live.
Yeah. Well, of course, the Brixton Riots, which was the first one, was in 1981. And I was there on that Friday afternoon, almost at the very start of the incident that caused it all.
Oh, take us through that, please.
Okay, so I'm at Peckham and, you know, I have no qualms about saying it, although it makes me massively unpopular at times. A lot of the policing in Peckham and surrounding stations was vile, repugnant, and racist. It's a fact. I saw it. I was there. There are a lot of people that are in denial about it, people from the police, and there are a lot of people that get right on their high horses because they say, well, I was in the police in the late 70s and the early 80s, and I saw nothing of it. Great, good for you. I'm delighted to hear that. But I did. And my experience of it would be very different from theirs. And I've no qualms about telling it, because unless an organisation like the police looks itself in the mirror, confronts its wrongdoing of the past, then it ain't going to move on as I see it. So, yeah, woe betide, you were a young black kid in Peckham or Brixton or some of the surrounding areas in those days and your face didn't fit. Anyway, it's 1981. I'm still in uniform, but I'm part of what is called a divisional support unit. And basically, that was a long wheelbase transit van with windows, green. You might have seen them in historical news clips and what have you, with about a dozen uniform officers on board who were all quite lively thief takers. You know, we liked working hard. We could spot a wrong 'un. And so we would patrol areas where there'd been a lot of crime. They were later called hotspots, you know. So if there'd been an outbreak of theft from motor vehicles in one particular location, you know, that's where we'd focus, all that kind of stuff. We were a bit of a sort of local man's special patrol group kind of thing in those days, but of course, without their reputation. It's a Friday. We've had a really long week. And instead of this van having a dozen or so of us on it, we've dropped people off wherever they park their cars because it's Friday, Poets' Day. Piss off early, tomorrow's Saturday, Poets' Day, right? So most people are in their car and going home. There's about 4 of us left on there, and this shout goes up Friday afternoon. Urgent assistance required, Roughton Road, Brixton. Well, we're in Camberwell. We're only a couple of minutes away. Bang, we'll have some of that, yeah? On with the 2 tones, whoosh, over we go. And when we get to Roughton Road, there's a disturbance, clearly, and there's a lot of tension already building. And we get out and we just try and give a little bit of show of force because there's people already kind of forming a line and trying to encroach upon us, and tempers are already frayed, and it ain't looking too clever. We rapidly heard what we were told was the cause for this tension. In the run-up to that Friday afternoon, in Brixton, there had been what they called Operation Swamp. Now, it's 1981. Roughton Road in Brixton was known as the front line, right? And there was undoubtedly, you know, plenty of cannabis dealing that went on there. And to an extent, it had become a bit of a no-go area. Well, Brixton police locally were going to try and stamp down on all of that. There was also, you know, street robberies, which were known as mugging. They'd had outbreaks of that. And they had decided, the senior cops at Brixton, in their wisdom, that to get as many cops in plain clothes as they could on the streets, and if it moved, you stopped it and you searched it, right? Regardless. It was called Operation Swamp. So the clue is in the title, isn't it? Nobody's left in any doubt. And this had been going on for some time, and tensions were almost at breaking point. So when we got to Roughton Road, with Operation Swamp as a backdrop, we're already dealing with a local population who are tense, who are angry, who are frustrated. We were told that a young black man got stabbed. A cop, with a view to trying to stem the bleeding, knelt over the wound on his back. But people misconstrued that as him being arrested. So, hence, there'd been a lot of tension. We were told undoubtedly this cop was merely trying to help the stabbing victim by stemming the bleeding. Anyway, Chinese whispers, things get confused, things get embellished, and lies get told. Tensions building. A few rocks go over, bits of rubble, few bottles, all of that. We had a couple of shields in the back of the van. We pulled them out in a sort of attempt to try and quell this minor uprising, if you will, because, policing was imposed on those populations in those days. It wasn't policing by consent. It's a nonsense. Policing was imposed on these minority populations. They got what they were given. A lot out of fear, because police in those days were simply scared of a black face, as were so many people in the in the wider population. So the tension is building. On their side, numbers are increasing. On the police side, numbers are increasing. And then some Einstein-like genius, I'm being sarcastic, from Brixton Police Station calls all of us off the streets to sit around Brixton, Nick, while they're coming up with some hurriedly cobbled together policy as to what they're going to do, because it clearly was a tinderbox. A little while later, after we've grabbed a sandwich, word comes down from on high that all these vehicles that have gathered in Brixton, local units from different nicks and what have you, are to patrol endlessly in a loop, going down Roughton Road, down to Tulsill almost, bung a right, back up through Brixton, another right, and through Roughton Road, again and again and again. We're not to get out of the vehicles. We're not to stop and search anybody. We are just to patrol endlessly in these vehicles. Well, I got to tell you, all we were was a red rag to a very angry bull. And the tensions were getting even higher. We could see people walking across the street in front of us with crates of empty milk bottles disappearing down a basement, right? We knew what was going on. They were going to make petrol bombs. So what we would have done normally is get out, stop them, and either nick them or certainly, at the very least, have those crates of milk bottles off them. But no, we were to do nothing. As we patrol, you can imagine the hand gestures, can't you? And the shouting and all of that. It went both ways. Okay? And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So this carried on until the early hours of the morning when we were pulled off. By the time we went back there on the Saturday, it just kicked off like you would not believe. I mean, Brixton burned.
Where were you at that point?
In the same van that we'd been in on the Friday.
So what are you seeing? How are you seeing it ignite?
Well, a lot I didn't see, because after all our windows had been put in, and I mean all our windows, right? The window level is about sort of a metre and a bit off the ground. So I'm ducking down with my head beneath there.
So you're just getting bombarded.
So I'm not going to cop anything coming through the window. We had our truncheon straps wrapped around our wrists and our truncheons out of the window, so that as we drove into a crowd, it was like boom, 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 boom. You could feel but not see that you were clearly hitting something. And I suspect they were people's heads. But, buildings...
Like in a chariot or something?
Yeah, buildings were ablaze. A pub that on the Friday night, the night before, the landlady had come out, knocked on the back of our van, we'd opened the rear door, and she'd slung a crate of light ales on the back of the van, right? And said, there you go, boys, have a drink on me. Right? She was really pro old Bill. The following day, her pub was burnt to the ground. Her and her husband were tied up and doused in petrol and threatened to be set alight. Right? It was carnage. There was rows and rows of cars overturned, set on fire. People were throwing everything they could lay their hands on at us. And I actually feared for my life. And I saw how many people, had they been given the opportunity, would have quite happily killed me.
Did you fear for your life the whole time, or was there a moment you thought, shit, this is too much?
There were lulls. For example, there was looting going on Brixton High Street. So sometimes units would be pulled away and told there to go and, try and deal with the looters who were raiding jewellery shops, clothes shops, anything everything was getting smashed to smithereens. And at one point we stood there and we just went, nah, because it was completely getting out of hand. We were losing it. Politician Ken Livingstone, who later became the Mayor of London, described that weekend and said that the police got a bloody good eye at him. Well, he wasn't wrong. Hundreds of cops were injured. Many members of the public were injured. It was remarkable that nobody died. Nothing short of miraculous.
Who was making the policy decisions at the top of the government?
Well, Thatcher was Prime Minister. Willie Whitelaw was the Home Secretary.
Willie Whitelaw.
Yeah, he came down to Brixton the following day. And I think part of the reasons that government sat up and took so much notice of it, or should I say was so afraid of it, is because Brixton's only 4 miles from Westminster. This is just down the road from the seat of Parliament. Willie Whitelaw famously walked down the street a day or two later, and a very learned, described as liberal judge, Lord Scarman, was appointed to write a report on the events, and his report was published, in book form as well. So what happened to me? Sorry, if I may just rewind. I eventually got home in the early hours of the Sunday. Wasn't required back on the Sunday, albeit it still kicked off a bit on that day, and I was very grateful for that. And on the Monday, I walked into Peckham, Nick, and I decided that I was done with wearing a uniform, because the cloth that I wore had become such a symbol of oppression and brutality and everything that was wrong and vile with the police in those days, that I wanted to get out of it. And I'd been approached about going into plainclothes before that and had sort of just rebutted those approaches. But I thought, right, no, I'm doing it now. I'll go into plainclothes, hopefully become a detective and leave my uniform days behind me. Did I bottle it? Yeah, you could say I did. Should I have stayed in uniform, made things better? Yeah, I should have done. But on that Monday morning, I walked into the canteen and there was a uniformed sergeant proudly boasting that he'd fitted up a 6'3" young black kid with looting a lady's size 5 left shoe, and he was boasting about it, and I just went, it's kind of, no, I've got to get out of this uniform.
If you are looking for a harrowing, hard-hitting Christmas read as a gift for somebody, my latest book, I've written 17. This is part of a 3-book series. Latest one, 3rd in the installment, Sit-Downs with Serial Killers and Murderers. Link in the description box below this video. From the back, having gained a rep for earning the trust of some of the world's most dangerous people, Shaun delves into his most hard-hitting interviews with the most menacing and violent murderers he's ever met. From serial killers to brutal prison gangs, Shaun has collected his most fascinating and incredible conversations with shocking criminal figures. He explores the life of an armed robber, a man who spent 45 years behind bars, and a serial killer with 52 confirmed victims. That's Delmas Colvin. I had to listen to that podcast again the next day. It disturbed my sleep. It's the most chilling one I've ever done, I would say, was interviewing Delmas in prison where he's serving life. If you're interested in these books, we appreciate your support. Links will be in the description box below this video if you're watching on YouTube. Cheers.